Here's another episode of Shop Talk by Vernon Snowbikes for your immense enjoyment. Welcome to Vernon Snowbikes, episode 2 of Shop Talk.
Filmed 1.5 beer and a flat of sushi after episode 1.
Thank you for that. And our planned topics for tonight are getting hurt on snowbikes, which we seem to be proficient at.
Been there.
Well done, yeah.
350s versus 450s versus 500. Supercross versus enduros as well. We'll try and keep that one short. Chad. Short track versus long track. And towing a snowbike and bump starting. Let's start with getting hurt on snowbikes. We'll send it over to our lead test dummy and most hurt person ever.
Resident crash dummy, I'd like to be called. I think the worst injury I've had was breaking my leg. First day of the season, out for a ride, ripping through a ditch. The bike was completely compressed. I was up on the pegs, and there was a stump under the snow. Caught the front of my foot, peeled my foot back, and snapped my tibia. And you'll hear in a couple of seconds when Scott rolls the B-roll.
Scotty Spielberg, that is.
That's right. You can actually hear the bone break. It was
disgusting.
It was a bad one. And it really came down to not having proper protection on my feet. And I've gone to wearing a lace-up Velcro ankle brace that I wear inside my boots, and definitely does provide extra protection.
Right, and that makes me think about these boots. I just wore these today for the first time. These Tubi, is that the proper way to pronounce it, Chad?
However you'd like, yeah.
All right, we'll go with Tubi. I got these from Interspace, and the folks at Tubi, you told me these were great. I rode with them today. They're fantastic, really, really sturdy. And that's what I was looking for too, because I was with you on that adventure. I want a good sturdy boot, and these seem to be the bomb.
He drove me to the hospital that day.
Yeah, we filmed in the hospital. That was
We
awesome.
did.
Well, thankfully we caught your injury on video. Let's take a minute to take a look at that.
Yeah, and a quick point, couple of points. I wasn't going fast, and I wasn't doing anything heroic at that time.
Yeah, and for the next 6 weeks you weren't doing anything at all.
Ooh.
Check this out. So Andrew, before we carted you off to the hospital with your broken leg, Warren did have the presence of mind to do a little bit of filming and do a quick incident investigation.
Yeah, thanks, pal. I'm laying in the ditch with a broken leg, and you're running around with the GoPro. Awesome.
All right, let's take a look.
This might be our first trip to the hospital. So just to show you what Swag cut through with his foot. Came bouncing through there. Smash! And down.
So Andrew, that injury was quite a bummer. Before we get back to the round table, do you have any final words of wisdom?
I do. Wear your armor, guys, and stiff boots. We're exposed. We're not running on running boards like on a sled, and your feet are hanging out there.
That's right. I think there's a new generation of boots just starting to come out now that recognize snowbikers have their feet hanging out there. Your feet and your legs can get broken.
Yeah.
So Warren, you've recently had an incident. How can you hurt yourself on a snowbike?
Oh, I did a great job. So, I was out for a week. So, the armor that I wear is the same as dirt biking, and I'm really glad that I did. Ripping along and went to jump, kind of go over 2 logs. As I came down, the ski went under the second log instead of going over. Dead stop, slammed into the handlebars, and scorpion basically back. Heels touched my helmet.
You kicked yourself in the head?
I pretty much did, yeah. I shudder to think how that would have been if I hadn't had full chest armor on in that case.
Ian, do you ever hurt yourself?
Yeah.
Today?
I haven't had too many bad injuries on a snowbike. Owen's had a couple where he kissed the handlebars pretty hard with his shoulder, hurt himself. I've been relatively lucky on the snowbike. Not going hard enough.
Chad, you ride like 400 hours a week.
Believe it or not, my biggest injury would be saddle sores.
Can we see that?
Yeah, show the crap.
Where exactly do you get these saddles?
Yeah.
If you spend any time on a snowbike, we all know that we sit for 90% of the day. The seat is cold, and if you ride lots or if your bike gets used, that seat is constantly wet foam, and in minus 20 turns into a solid piece of ice. So one of my best tricks is actually being a kayak store. I actually wear kayaking rubber neoprene shorts over the long johns, and it definitely has been one of the best quick fixes that you can add to any performance seat, from what I found. But insulating yourself from that seat was definitely key on not having any injuries.
You put me onto that last year, and I will not go riding without my knee brace.
If you
shorts
forget
on.
them, your whole
I
day's
know,
ruined.
I know.
You're already upset.
So mad at myself.
Yeah.
So you guys don't get monkey butt?
No more monkey butt.
No. I even forgot them one day, and I took the liner out of my jacket and rolled it like a diaper, and I put it in my pants, and it looks like I had a load back there. But
It's funny that you say that, because we were at the motocross track a couple of weeks ago. We ran into a pretty decent motocross rider who's gearing up for the nationals here, and he came over at the end of the day, and I was feeling good that day because I actually caught up to him and passed him. And then at the end of the day, he took that away from me. He's like, "This is day 4 riding, man. I got so much fucking monkey butt." He's like, "I can't even barely ride with these things." I'm like, oh, you just
The one thing I'm most worried about hurting on my body, and it hasn't happened, is my wrists. I've done a couple of Supermans right over the front of the bars. This year, massive deceleration, and I get up and I'm just like, my wrists hurt. And I think it's just from that super deceleration. I've heard about people going through the, no, I haven't heard. I've heard people being afraid about going through the bark busters.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what's happening to me, but I get up and I'm like, wow, that's smart.
I might
That-
not bust it.
brings up another mod. Like myself personally, we don't run wraparound aluminum guards, and I can think of 2 occasions this year where I've gone over the bars and actually I run a plastic, like the factory plastic hand shield, and I've taken them off with my fists as I went over the handlebars. So had an aluminum guard been there, I don't know what the outcome would have been. It might have been worse.
Interesting. Any other injuries you guys want to throw into the mix?
We don't have enough time tonight
Yeah.
for me to talk
All
about
right,
my
yeah,
injuries.
okay. Everyone just calm down.
just a quick thing that would be any part of your body, though, would be hyperthermia. And a lot of people, you get excited with riding. I see these. You guys are cold. Can't emphasize on really good gloves, an extra change of gloves for that matter. Balaclava, whether it be 1 or 2 different options. And obviously, I notice having proper footwear on those kinds of things. But a couple of small details go a long way. But my biggest injuries, because I spend so much time out on the bike, would be actually getting some form of frostbite, either in fingertips, sides of the face in this cold weather. It doesn't take long to coming down a trail. So just have a couple of those extra things.
Yeah, for sure.
So that-
Good point.
Nice. Let's get into one of our feature topics, which is 350s versus 450s versus 500s. We have a mix here. Well, Chad has all the bikes because he's spoiled.
Yes.
You and I have had 450s and 500s.
Yeah.
Warren is riding
350.
Twink,
350.
which is a 350.
Yeah.
And Ian, you can build whatever you want all
Yeah,
the time.
we did a 350 last year based on Chad's success in 2014 with running the 350 in. And surprisingly, I mean, a lot of people really gravitated towards that bike. It was just fun. I'm not going to say you're going to win the drag race or you'll be the first to top the hill, but it is a fun bike to ride. And I know, Chad, you can elaborate on that.
I think it's his throttle response that wicks up. So for the guy that wants to be entertained, in other words, you're riding the bike as an operator, I guess would be the easiest way to say. So you are doing a little bit more shifting, you are doing a little bit more throttling, and playing on it. But one of the funnest things is it just seems like the pop with that extra. On average, it's 10 pounds lighter than most of the bigger bikes, and doesn't sound like a lot. But when you're trying to leave the snow, it definitely feels like it wants to come out of the snow for sure.
Hard getting it to stand back up. I mean, well, I tried both 450s that you guys ride, between the Yeti, the timber sled, and then my 350 with the timber sled. And there's a noticeable weight difference as you go through. And being new, and I'm getting my bike back up a lot, makes a big difference.
But you made that choice for the 350
Yeah.
for a really good reason. I think maybe the viewers should know that.
Well, so I wanted to get into snowbiking. I thought it was a great idea that I should probably learn on dirt first. And Ian, you were huge in that. All the time you spent with me came in, and we figured that 350 was a really good option for me for learning with minimum damage.
You would have died on a 450 is what we're trying to say.
Let's
Yeah,
face it, a lot of
yeah.
guys, like if you were to try and cut your teeth riding off-road, or moto for that case, on a 450, they're a bike that demands respect, and a little bit of whiskey throttle is really going to get you in trouble. Whereas the 350 is a little bit more manageable, and I think it was just a surprise to everybody that built one how good they are on snow.
Well, that higher RPM makes a huge difference, right? And it's done great. You guys have ridden it, so what do you think?
I find the spool up to be a little bit laggy in the bottom end. Like, you have to get it with what I like about the 450s, and what I really liked about the 500 was third gear, mash it. Doesn't matter what you're doing, the thing will get up and go. With your bike, I find that you have to be a little pickier, like Chad said, in the gears. You have to be working the transmission a little more, and you have to keep it in that top end, above say 7 or
Yeah.
8 grand. You're really
Well, and some of the filming that we've tried to do, for me to be able to keep up with you guys, you almost have to give me a bit of a head start. I've got to spool up through that gear where you guys hit it and you're up and you're going right now. I need a little bit of time to get there. Once I'm there, I can stick with you, but if we just go from a start, forget it.
And that's us on the 450s,
Yeah.
and we rode 500s. Well, I did for the last 3 years. You did for the first year, 3 years ago that we rode these bikes, and the 500 is fantastic for that. You put it in third gear at the truck, and you leave it in third gear all day.
You almost
Doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter what
It's
you're
very
doing.
forgiving for the
Just
beginners.
twist it. Yeah.
If you're a beginner and you don't have a lot of experience clutching
Mhm.
and throttle control, then you can hop in a 500 and putt around all day long, and you probably won't at least stall it that much. You'll still dump it lots, but
Well, and Chad, you said it too. It's a little more technical with the clutching and shifting gears, which I think is starting to really click now for me, and it's becoming. First couple rides, it was pretty frustrating
Until we roll up and kick you over.
Yeah, then that adds to it. It's great, but now it's fun.
Awesome.
It's a lot of fun.
What else have we got on the list here?
well, Chad, let's hear a comparison. What you think between
Yeah.
a 450 and a 500? What are the differences between the bikes?
If you pretty much told me I had to narrow it down for my one go-to toy, the 500 wins this conversation because I actually ride a FE 501 as my bush bike. Now, for most guys that are only say 5'7" and 175 pounds, a lot of guys think that's probably the wrong choice for you. But I feel that I'm more comfortable on it because I use its weight to go through things. So it will carry itself through a lot of the stuff. So as long as you get used to letting those bigger bikes out from underneath you and pulling it back in when you want it. But that torque just seems to get you. If there's an ugly section, just pretend it's not even there, and it just seems like its weight mashes through it, and it seems like you have full control over that. So torque, I think, has a lot to do with that, whether it be on dirt or snow. So out of the box, the 500 is one of the best machines I've ever ridden for not having to do a tremendous amount of modifications to it. Now, with that said, if you said, no, this is your snow bike and build a snow bike, the 450 wins. And I say this because it creates tremendous amount of power all the way from the bottom to the end. It does rev quickly. It has, it seems to really use its transmission well. Like you can hold a good RPM in those gears, the way that they seem to overlap. Like once again, you guys say living in third, like on those bikes you can live on third, but you can still pull fourth. And if you want to be really quick on it in the trees, you can still drop in a second and make some pretty good gnarly decisions and get the front end to come off the ground. So for just an ultimate modded snow bike, the 450 in my mind takes my heart. And then if you said best all around bike out of the box for general purpose use, whether it be dual sport, bush ride and snow bike, and my 501 definitely does not let me down.
Very nice. Well, let's just take a minute to let Ian, who's the most technical of all of us, talk about just why are enduro bikes and motocross bikes different? Or what are some of the differences?
One of the things I want to point out, so the 450 and the 500 share the same size piston. So the actual bore is 95 millimeters. The only difference between the 450 and the 500 is the stroke. The stroke on the 500 is longer, meaning the crankshaft is moving the piston further up and down in the cylinder. That stroke is where the torque comes from. That's also where a bike with a longer stroke feels heavier. So we've all said, oh, the 350 feels light. You put the 350 on a scale, it is marginally lighter than a 450 or 500, but it's not a whole bunch lighter, but it feels lighter because it's a short stroke engine. Enduro bikes versus MX. The motocross bikes are built to be light and super fast. They don't come with the creature comforts that snow bikes like in terms of 6-speed transmissions, bigger charging systems. They have a little bit heavier flywheel. Typically they come with a bigger battery. They have the onboard power to run accessories like lights and heated grips and whatnot. We can make a motocross bike do all of those things. It's add-ons. Whereas when you say one of the easiest bikes to build into a snow bike is an enduro bike. They just come so well equipped. Put the track on it, maybe stepping up the forks. There's so much added value there that the motocross bikes don't come.
Yeah, we didn't have to do a lot of mods to my 350.
No, Warren's 350,
Yeah.
17 special edition long track, and some stiffer fork springs.
Yeah.
Nice. And let's just quickly talk about the geometry differences between two different bikes, because we're noticing it translates into different handling and possibly some different bits and bobs that we might be adding or removing from the bikes. We're not even sure yet, but
Yeah. Well, traditionally, the motocross bikes are cutting edge. They get the newer frame geometry sooner. So a lot of times, enduro bikes could be a model year or two behind in terms of geometry. So if you have a 17 model motocross bike compared to a 17 model enduro bike, the enduro bike might be a motocross bike from a few years ago with some add-ons. So typically, the motocross bikes get the newer technology first, and they're a little bit more stripped down, lightweight, more focused. If you have a 350, I've heard a lot of guys say that, hey man, I got a 350, it's not going to tow a track. I disagree. If that's the bike you have, it'll do a really good job with it.
cool. Well, thanks everyone for your thoughts on that. Let's move on to short track versus long track. Andrew, we ran short tracks for the first 3 years. We thought we were total rock stars, and then finally we got on the long tracks.
We're kicking our own asses.
Now we're rock stars.
Yeah,
we weren't rock stars.
Noticeable difference.
But we're riding in the mountains. We always have to remember philosophy of use whenever we're talking about any of this stuff. It's where we're riding, what we're trying to do with our things. We're not racers. We're in the trees all the time in the mountains.
Yeah.
So who wants to start? Short track, long track?
Chad, lead us off.
Okay, there's a couple things that we get asked lots where guys always say is the long track harder on my machine than possibly a short track. So yes, we agree that a long track's going to be heavier, there's more mass, there's more track. Now the gear ratio in the two kits, for example, Timbersled is the same gearing, whether it be short or long. But I definitely find that on the long track, especially when I take new people out, that bike seems to definitely get less abuse because you don't need to rev it nearly as much to get from point A to point B. So therefore, with the kit being floaty, I guess you would call it, it definitely walks or tractors over the snow with, I would say, less fuel and less effort, versus as it gets deeper with a shorter track, people feel the need that they need to be on it. In other words, they're definitely revving that motor. So if you were to kind of calculate the two same bikes with two track hits, I'd say that you'd do 30% less RPM on a long track throughout the day, probably over a short track to obtain the same amount of distance covered. So if that kind of helps, if you're trying to do like more touring, cover more ground, less abuse to your machine, those kinds of things, the long track would definitely win in that category. So
Last year when some of the guys with long tracks, local guys were talking to us, they were saying, it's like you got a big board. You move from a small track to a big
Yeah.
bike. It's almost like your bike got more power because you're getting that flotation. You're not needing to spin the track as much and you just kind of go a little bit quicker.
Quick side note too, Chad's got 6 long tracks at Interspace that he's trying to blow out right now, so
He's
give him
being
a shout.
shy. He wasn't going to say anything
Give him a
about it,
shout.
so
I'm not shy.
we got a couple short tracks. You want those too?
he owes you $50 now.
That's right. Pay me
I know.
later.
Ian, I think it's interesting you recently switched from long track to short track, like just in the last couple of weeks. And
Yeah.
you've had some experiences.
So we've run the short tracks and the SX and the long. In the last 2 seasons, my primary go-to bike has been a long track. But this year I pulled it off. We haven't had a lot of deep snow, and the shorty's fun too. You just have to spin it faster. But I noticed right away. I mean, if I want to point and shoot and climb, the long track does a better job of it. But if we're not having a deep snow year, I mean, the short track is pretty nimble, and you just end up spinning the track faster. But primarily, the reason I did that is the Snowbike Nationals coming up. I mean, we're not going to take the long track to a snowcross event. So
Well, the one thing we haven't done much riding, you and I, in the spring, and Warren included because it's his first year on a snowbike, but in the spring when things are more settled, do you guys find that the short tracks are better? Like, does the long track push you around when things are set up? It's more side hilly and it's not as forgiving, the snow?
I would definitely, it's just as the spring seems to come around, you've been on your bike all season, the deep snow is now gone, you're kind of over the sensation of it's a snow bike. Now it just seems to be a glacier conquering machine. So most of us, I think, we start going all sorts of places with the short tracks, whether it be a short or a long, but I think most of us like to get more playful as the snow doesn't get so nice. So when it's blower pow snow, you're just happy just ripping through the pow, or coming down a creek bed or going through a set of trees. Spring snow, you've already done, say, 40, 50 rides that season. Your entertainment value of the blower is gone, so therefore you're looking for other things to entertain yourselves. Steeper side hills, navigating around cliff faces, possibly more jumps and bumps, that kind of thing. So the short track is more playful. You can jump a long track by any means, but it just definitely feels like it wants to stay on the ground. It just doesn't want to kind of pop and ditch bang through like a short track technically would. And a lot of us love to wheelie slide, which is similar to like riding like a 2-stroke dirt bike with rubber tires. If you can get that thing chewing on the right angle, get your weight back on the seat and do it, like the short track, you can feel it kind of slide out from underneath you, which gives you that little bit more of that fun factor that you're kind of doing a burnout, I guess you could call it. So
Cool. You have anything to add to that?
Well, I just, when you mentioned that, I mean, the 120 that I have on there on the back of my big bar, I mean, I could spin the thing loose coming out of the corners, and that is fun. I mean, it's just fun.
Drifting, basically.
Yeah.
Alright.
Now, one thing that actually nobody's mentioned, we got short track versus long track, but don't forget there is a unique length out there that kind of probably put Yeti SnowMax kind of on the map, is that they decided after talking to a couple of the big shops of what's the most popular, that they came out with a 129, which literally is identically in between a 120 and a 137. So it is a mid-length track, which I've been riding for the bulk of the season, and it has its entertainment value to it, that when it was blower pal, I was not hindered by any means, keeping up with all the long tracks. But then if I was doing anything on the short tracks, going through a whoop section or bumps, I didn't really seem to notice it was a little longer than my short track. So it was a very nice blend, and I'm not going to lie, that was definitely what kind of suited that, is that it's a mid-length, but you can adapt those to other models. Like for instance, you could take a timber sled, buy a Yeti rail extension and drop a 129 track in it. So realistically, if you want to know which best snowbike kit to have, is one of each.
Well spoken.
True salesman.
Let's move into the final segment. We will have some B-roll that we'll film for you out later, but we've got to talk about towing a snowbike and bump starting a snowbike. You and I had to do it earlier this year. One of the bikes died.
Valve cover gasket.
Valve cover gasket.
We
So
talked about that in episode 1.
until we towed it out.
Way back.
Yeah, it was messy. We had straps.
We had rope.
We had rope.
Yeah.
And we tied knots, which didn't come undone.
Grandma
we,
knots.
We cut the rope after we
Yeah.
were done.
Terrible.
And Chad showed us, I got one of my props right down here. Here, Chad, I'll give this to you. This is one of the straps that you recommend using, and we'll show people how that you wrap that around
Yeah.
the frame and around the rear of the bike. But just
This
talk us through
is
it.
just a simple, just over 1 inch of webbing. It's got an incredibly high tensile strength to it, so it'll take a lot of load to it. It can be cut if you needed to in an emergency to make it multiple pieces or shorter. But in a nutshell, it has a single cam, is what we call it. There's no hooks, there's no nothing, so it's just an ended loop. So these can be used in numerous ways, and I could show you a couple different ways. But in a nutshell, the bike that is no longer working, say if it was a bomb start, you want to be able to bomb start this thing and then get the thing detached relatively quickly to make sure that you can keep it running. Or if the person has some mechanical thing and you want to, once it's started, you just want to get them out of your hair, that these pipes and exhausts are extremely hot, so you don't want to be burning or melting yourself. So very simply, we just go in between the two forks of one bike, and you come through the main frame of the motorcycle. So you're pulling right from the engine, so that typically when you're pulling from that position, it does not feel like the bike is really being pulled. Therefore, the ski wants to naturally float over obstacles. You can still lean, you can still turn. So that we definitely found is that's the deft connection point, is to the main frame of the motorcycle. Most bikes, from what I've seen, are definitely like a wire wishbone, so we just go off to one side by the pipe and connect it to the single cam by coming up to the bottom. So we carry 2 of these, and then on the second bike that's pulling, it's just a simple loop like so. So if this is a 15-foot strap, now I've got a 7-foot strap, so with 2 of these, you're 15 feet off the bike, which if you want to do a quick, say, adjustment to shorten it, you pull on the cam and you could simply shorten it up. If you want to move it from one tow bike to another, it's just a lot quicker than tying knots.
Yeah.
So, for an example, if we'll just use your arm as, say, here is the bumper of the snow bike. We would see most people would typically want to do this and either just go back to itself, which not saying that's not fine, but you're going to get a pull or a twist off the tunnel. And a lot of the snowbike kits will look robust and firm, but if pulling from anything on the geometry, you will but twist or kink a side panel by doing so. So I found the best is roughly take around 18 inches, go through either the bumper holes and wrap multiple times, because we're going to spread that square inch out. And then with the extra lac, go to the other side of the bumper and do the same. So we'll just kind of cheat here a little bit. The arm obviously is a little bit wider than a typical snowbike bumper.
Beefy.
So I typically went around 3 straps, go around the bumper below it, and then I'd go, say, around 3 more times. The nice thing is with the slack coming out, say I went through my cam like so, now I've actually created a Y, so it's going to pull a lot more symmetrical from the bumper. So on the bike that's pulling, definitely choose the bike that's either got the most amount of torque and or the longest track, for that matter. So you definitely don't want to be spinning it, and I call it the running man. Do not attempt to have both feet on the pegs. You want to kind of be straddling over that seat, keeping your weight real light to preload off of it. Let that clutch out start torquing. If you've got multiple guys while you're hooking up the bikes, you should have had them pounding at least a flat trail. If there's anything that could give you 1 degree downhill, it's just going to help. If you had to go uphill, you definitely want to pack that track and then roughly wait 20, 30 minutes, then you'll be quite amazed at how fast that snow will set. If you got an extra person in your party, put them behind the bike that needs to be towed, and at least just start pushing or walking the track just enough to get it so when the slack and all the things tension up is what we find for most people right away is they clench and then they'll fall over right away. Getting some ski push, but that's what I'm saying, if you keep your weight off the bike as it starts to go, get someone rolling, once you get just a little bit of momentum, it just gets easier. So it's just that initial takeoff that's definitely hard. But having slack and jerking it is definitely not going to win that battle. So it's definitely trying to get it up to a crawl. If you got another guy on the bike, do the same. So typically lightest guy on the bike being towed, bigger bike on the guy that's doing the towing, longest track on the front, etc. And you can kind of see how that picture is painted, but we've definitely done this for a lot of jump starts, or when we talked about starting a bike at the beginning of the morning when it's minus 20. You do this off the receiver hitch of your truck and just let that thing roll in fourth gear. Instead of killing your battery, being hard on everything and trying to get it started, I guarantee you a bomb start like this, even on an icy road, at some point that transmission's going to start to roll and the thing's going to fire. So
I remember when you towed Dave out, that was a
Yeah.
couple years ago. Yeah, we did not attach it to the frame.
No.
We attached the ski.
So
You guys-
ski hoops.
He ate it like 15 times on the way down. It was
Yeah,
so
I had
comical.
so much fun, but I don't think he was enjoying it.
His face was covered in ice and everything. It
I
was
think
just-
our
it was
toe strap was
fantastic.
a little bit short, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that was our
getting
problem.
Some good
We
footage.
did go to the frame, but our strap was short.
Yeah.
And you were kind of driving me. I was towing you, but I was hitting the ditch and then dragging you through stuff, and you had to go everywhere I went. It was a complete disaster. It was lots of fun. So that's why we made little videos so we could share a little bit of kung fu with you, and Chad knows how to do these things because he probably tows a lot more people out than we do. So I think that's it. We did everything on our list, guys. That's a wrap.
Well done.
We're going to come back for episode 3. We're actually going to take a few days off and have some different folks in here.
We're out of sushi.
We're out of sushi and we're running low on beer.
ginger ale is not beer. Check them out.
Well, thanks everybody, and we look forward to seeing you again sometime soon.
Thanks, guys.
Stay safe.
Thanks for watching.